Preservation Issues and Controversies, Challenges of Underutilised and Abandoned Places. Authors Julia Hamilton and Dr. Renata Jadresin-Malik.
Digitalisation of Heritage in New Zealand, a Unitec 2020 research project. In 2019, a project of heritage digitalisation in New Zealand was approved by Research and Enterprise Office at Unitec Institute of Technology. The project aims to set up an information tool for preservation, restoration, and maintenance. It aims to have both academic and practical value in advancing knowledge about heritage in New Zealand, to provide a means for establishing New Zealand's current state of knowledge in the practice of archiving heritage buildings and their possible adaptive reuse opportunities, to be useful for the end user, and to aid in learning about the built environment. The undertaken literature review presented in this paper reflects on New Zealand's current state of knowledge by providing an overview of cultural heritage issues nationally and then more specifically in local areas. It includes information on legislative policies and regulations that are being followed at present, along with highlighting key problems that arise. It then talks about the range of conservation methods available and the benefits or evaluation points for each, after analysing the different heritage conservation practices. Context. At the time that laws and regulations were devised in Europe concerning the preservation of cultural heritage buildings and sites, the arrival of European settlers to New Zealand was just starting. Until this day, an act that aims to protect conservation areas in New Zealand has yet to be passed by the government. Due to the lack of legislation around conservation areas, many significant cultural heritage buildings have been lost by demolition or unsympathetic developments. Heritage New Zealand is a government organisation primarily focused on promoting the significance and relevance of cultural heritage. They are in charge of heritage buildings and site listings. Heritage listings are based on a building or site's cultural significance and are categorised as either Category 1 or 2 listings. Heritage places listed as Category 1 are deemed to have special or outstanding historical significance, while those as Category 2 are deemed to have notable historical importance. However, cultural heritage identified and listed by Heritage New Zealand is not automatically guaranteed security from demolition or deterioration beyond repair that can be caused by buildings becoming redundant or neglected. House and Jadresin-Malik mention that at present, heritage protection from destruction is managed by New Zealand local councils. Local councils hold the highest authority to ensure the demolition protection of historical buildings, as they include obligations under legislation for protection and management of cultural heritage. Policy, literature, and legislation. In New Zealand, cultural heritage is managed through a large number of organisations and requires shared responsibility between both the local and central governments. This shared management of duty differs from many other countries that manage heritage under a centralised government agency. Beeson recognised that when it comes to historic preservation in New Zealand, preservation ordinances enacted by local governments typically hold the highest jurisdiction. The Resource Management Act in 1991 provides for the protection of historic heritage from inappropriate subdivision, use, and development. The Resource Management Act supports the sustainable management of natural and physical resources. And in 2003, Section 6F of the Resource Management Act improved the standard for heritage planning assessment by elevating the protection of historical heritage to a national importance matter. The two leading national agencies that manage heritage protection here in New Zealand, identified by Beeson, are the Department of Conservation and the New Zealand Historic Places Trust, Pohere Taonga. Following these leading agencies, Beeson concludes that there are numerous other organisations and regulations involved in cultural heritage management that creates a complex system lacking coordination and direction that is an apparent problem for heritage management in New Zealand. The need for heritage provisions within district plans to be more consistent is evident in heritage provisions to ensure uncertainty between all parties who are involved can be avoided within the process. A noticeable heritage problem identified is the reality that the majority of registered heritage places in New Zealand are privately owned. This issue is highlighted by the understanding that heritage places and sites under heritage agency ownership, such as the New Zealand Historic Places Trust, have the highest amount of jurisdiction. Heritage conservation. When dealing with existing heritage projects, a range of conservation processes may be employed. Conservation methods are measured by the degree of intervention with guidance from the conservation principles set out in the International Council on Monuments and Sites New Zealand Charter. The New Zealand Charter states that any intervention that may compromise the cultural heritage value of a place is unfavourable and should not be undertaken. ICOMOS also advised that ideally all work dealing with heritage conservation should be subject to a conservation and maintenance plan with guidance from the New Zealand Historic Places Trust or qualified heritage professionals. The ICOMOS New Zealand Charter provides support for those involved with the conservation and management of cultural heritage places and should be made an integral document regarding statutory and regulatory heritage policies, plans, and management. The Charter outlines and defines the methods of heritage conservation in order of the level of intervention required, which includes preservation, restoration, reconstruction, adaptation, and non-intervention. Heritage conservation, adaptive reuse. Until recently, limited attention to adaptive reuse has been received in New Zealand as the result of the general perception that new construction is the single answer to meeting client demand. However, this is not necessarily the case, as in the literature, adaptive reuse of industrial buildings in a new precinct in Auckland CBD, Tan mentioned that building adaptation provides itself to be a successful alternative for urban redevelopment movements through the sustainable opportunities it provides. Reid has defined adaptive reuse as a process of retrofitting old buildings for new uses, which allows structures to retain their historic integrity while providing for occupants' modern needs. The ICOMOS New Zealand Charter lends support to this definition by stating that proposals for adaptation of a place may arise from maintaining its continuing use or from a proposed change of use. The texts examined all refer to the benefits of adaptive reuse as an environmentally, economically, and socially viable option through retention and adaptation of older buildings as opposed to undertaking a new development. The conversion of established industrial structures provides an alternative solution to the demolition of an existing structure that no longer meets expectation. Tan also mentioned that there is limited published research that explores the intangible value added through building adaptation and its significance as an essential resource in placemaking strategy and its role in place branding. The paper explores further into the below adaptive reuse topics of program, environmental benefits, and social benefits. From the literature review, the research found that the main problem at present combines an inherent conflict concerning private ownership rights and the fact that there is an apparent lack of synchronisation and direction between many different organisations that manage heritage in New Zealand. From drawing this conclusion, we intend to transition from understanding what the current state of knowledge and literature is to what is happening in practice currently. We want to investigate what is being practiced by heritage professionals and the architectural building industries. Future research will include conversations and interviews with architects and engineers from the sector, district councils, and government organisations such as Heritage New Zealand, with the primary aim to learn how New Zealand could and may benefit from some modifications in policies it has at the moment. Private owners of heritage buildings will also be consulted to gain an understanding of what would be valuable for them to help heritage buildings be retained and adaptively reused, and not demolished. Adaptive reuse of heritage buildings is directly connected with sustainability and environmental topics through related fields of the energy retrofit and seismic retrofit, and we see a lot of potential for change that may improve our environment to help us all live in a healthier world. We strongly believe that schools of architecture in New Zealand should play a role in helping this happen and take responsibility for calling for the change and modifications in policies. This paper is a part of an ongoing project, Digitalisation of Heritage in New Zealand, funded by our home institution, Unitec Institute of Technology. We would like to express our gratitude to Unitec for their support. Thank you.